If Irish Rugby is obsessed about anything, it is our number 10. So today's depth chart will no doubt be a little bit fruity. I'm delighted to say Andy Dunne is with us, a fruity number 10 himself. Andy, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, Ger. I'm very well, thanks.
Where would you be in your own depth chart at the moment?
Sorry?
Where would you be in your own depth chart at the moment? If, peak Andy Dunne, I don't know, was that your time at Connacht? Was that, or maybe your best years were spent stewing on the bench at Leinster, or maybe it was with Quins?
No, I probably the best fun times were stewing on the bench in my early years in Leinster. I think peak rugby-wise was probably in Harlequins. I had the best form of my career there, surrounded by a few English internationals.
Yeah, not a bad crew, not a bad setup, not a bad team. Just where would you be in the depth chart at the moment?
I would say near the bottom, without any false modesty. I think the game has moved on. I think the players, in terms of their fitness level, their skill level, their kicking percentages at 10, their accuracy, their passing off both hands, the increased level of threat towards them physically from defences. So I would comfortably put myself near the bottom there.
Okay, fair enough. We were having a little weird thought experiment a little bit earlier on. So was it Lowry we were talking about? This was your idea.
It's not my idea. I don't think I'm original. I'm sure you've seen, Andy, that Ulster fans know that Larry's has played 10 before. Is a potential number 10, and they see maybe the possibility of Stockdale coming in at 15, or can Addison can play at 15, and they're I guess people are just excited about this Ulster backline at the moment and trying to find constellations that involve getting all these kids on the pitch at once, and one of those constellations is Michael Lowry as a number 10.
Yeah, I can see the logic in it, in that I suppose Ulster's star turns this year have been their midfield, their centres, and the back three, and they have strength and depth in those positions. If Larry were to get a run at 10, I think he's on record as saying he'd love to do it himself as well. It's not so it's not beyond the realms of possibility. I think he'd be quite a throwback to the Welsh factory of out halves, to small in stature, jinky, elusive type players playing in at 10. That was very much commonplace in Welsh rugby in the 70s and 80s. So somebody like the likes of Jonathan Davies, for example, who famously went to rugby league. But yeah, I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility he could get a run there at some stage. I don't think it's in Dan McFarlane's immediate plans, but it might be in experimental plans down the road.
Is he too small? Is that actually a thing in international rugby now, or has the game kind of gone with the rule changes back the opposite direction? There, or you could have so he's 5.5 feet. Is there a possibility you could hide him in defence, but from an attacking perspective, it could be dynamite?
I don't think he's too small. If we're speaking plainly, I think he is obviously small in stature, but to play fullback is equally physically challenging. There's obviously the aerial battles. There's people would have questioned that regularly. Opposition coaches, and he comes through all of those tests with flying colours. I suppose there's a question mark in terms of the defensive channel that 10 plays now is pretty busy. A lot of traffic down through there and a lot of big back rowers. If for example, Lowry was playing against his own team, he'd have Vermeulen running at him pretty regularly, and that's a very obvious mismatch. Well, it's always been like that in the vast majority of out halves. If you look at Humphreys, who played for Ulster, you look at Raj, they weren't physically huge. I mean, the height doesn't make any difference in terms of your physicality and defence. So it's more about your ability to tackle, your technique. I wouldn't have any doubts about Larry being not physical enough for 10 in any way. I think it's a question of whether he's suited to running a game. He could be very innovative and tricky, but he may not be a good game manager at 10. That always takes time to tell.
Okay, that is the fair point, I suppose, because I was thinking, like, if you're Ulster and you're trying to win a European Cup, then you need some completely random outside the box thinking, because your 10 at the moment is grand when it comes to what you need to do, or your 10s at the moment are grand, but I'm not sure that you're going to be able to win a European Cup with them, and so maybe something like that in the long run might be possible. But anyway, look, we got a little bit off course there. Let's talk about your depth chart, right? There's no doubts Johnny Sexton's number one, or is there, in your mind?
No, I think he's clearly number one at the moment. Health and fitness allowing, I think there's no debate. No.
Okay, you've got Jack Carty number 2, which is very interesting because at this stage we don't feel like Carty is going to be part of the Ireland setup under this current management, but we're not sure. We don't know. Maybe he's played himself. Maybe it's been irresistible. What do you think?
I think his attributes all around as a 10 deserve inclusion. He's got something on his side now that perhaps the likes of, say, Harry Byrne doesn't. He's got experience and maturity in the role. He's got leadership as the captain in Connacht. I think he's hardened by experience, and I think as an out half, it's a hugely beneficial thing. He was very much the fall guy, I think, in the Japan World Cup. And people forget he created both tries in the first half against Japan. And the entire team was underperforming in an underperforming management at that stage. And I think Carty was unfairly made the fall guy because he wasn't sexton on the field. And he was omitted from the Irish squad. And then I think he even went through a loss of form where he wasn't being selected in Connacht in the immediate months following that World Cup. So he's come through very, very significant and very public challenges, and he's come out the other side. And I think that gives you a level of resilience and toughness that is merited for inclusion in an Irish setup at this stage. His current form is, I would say, fair or slightly above. I don't think he's playing the best rugby of his career, but I think he deserves a second bite. I really do, and so I included him.
Is there something more that Andy Farrell is seeing or not seeing? Because it is new management since then. Granted, Farrell, of course, was informing decisions in 2019 as well and was part of that coaching ticket. But is there something since then, Andy, or a theory that you think that might explain his absence from the Ireland squads?
No, I suppose he's looking at. He's just looking at all the players at his disposal. I don't think there's anything untoward going on. I think coaches will have preferences, coaches who have worked with players. Perhaps the loss of form that Carty showed, or perhaps there was something in terms of his consistency in training that Farrell, having worked with as a coach, may have seen that he didn't particularly appreciate at the time. But that's just speculation on my part. In terms of looking at him in the cold light of day, in terms of how he's performing on a regular basis for Connacht, I think he merits inclusion in the Irish squad. And I think his history is something that is going to stand to him in terms of his resilience overall, his ability to lead the troops, his ability to show game management, his maturity, and I suppose maturity in his own career gives him a seniority and gives him, I suppose, a bit of gravitas coming into that position where you can always pick young starlets, and it's always a risk, and there's nothing wrong with that either. But I think in the Six Nations, there is a very clear argument from my end to say that Jack Carty deserves to be in the conversation for sure.
I just want to play a quick clip. This is from last week's Friday Night Rugby, and Brian O'Driscoll was chatting about Jack Carty.
Just there's something about Carty that I just, I don't know. I want to see him attacking the ball a little bit more as a player and staying squarer. I think he's a habit a bit like Carberry of turning his shoulders to where the ball is being passed. And I think you get away with that maybe at URC, maybe even Europe, but at international level, pushing the defence onto the ball carrier there, they're going to get smashed. So I do think that's one area of his game that he absolutely needs to hone. Madigan used to do it as well for Ulster, and probably still does it a bit, where as soon as you turn your shoulders, the defence is gone from you. You're not a threat anymore. And they'll move on and get double hits on whoever your target is. So I think that's one area that he needs to improve on. But the rest of his game has been pretty solid. I look back on the Leicester performance again. I wouldn't say it was necessarily Roy of the Rovers stuff. It was, I'm looking for highlights for BT for the game on Saturday, and I watched the first half, and he was solid without being exceptional. Took his try well, obviously knocked over the drop goal at the end. So he's there for clutch moments and he's delivering, but for me there still remains some hang up. But yet the alternative right now with Carberry gone, I don't know if it's either of the Byrne brothers because of their lack of game time.
That's the question, right, isn't it? Like, at the moment, not a lot of people putting a hand up to say, pick me, coach, pick me, put me in, give me the ball. And he is doing that. He's playing regularly. He's number one at his province. He's playing at a high level. So it looks like he's worth a shot. Before we get to the Byrne brothers, right? If Carberry was fit, if he elbow or the arm injury hadn't happened, where would he be in the depth chart?
For me, he'd be number 2 as a shoe-in as well. I think Sexton and Carberry were established very well and very comfortably in those 2 positions after the autumn internationals. And I think Carberry really distinguished himself in terms of game management and in terms of pressure goal kicking, particularly in the New Zealand game and in the Argentina game as well. So I think overall, yeah, you have to just feel sorry for Joey. I'm sure he doesn't want pity, but he must be pretty demoralised given the last 2 years, and I'm pretty certain he would have got maybe 2, maybe even more starting games in this Six Nations, whether that was through choice or through Sexton, maybe not rolling 5 games on the bounce. But I would have thought it's obviously given Farrell a big headache, but I don't think there would be any argument. Had Carberry been fit, I think he was a clear second choice. Okay.
And getting close to putting Sexton under pressure, or no?
I think so. I think just that's based on the physical consistency levels for Sexton. It's difficult for him to put together a consistent run without a knock here and there. And for that reason, putting pressure on him. In terms of his overall game, he's a different player to Sexton, and I think that is a strength. We don't need to replicate Sexton forever. He's a certain style of player, and we won't always have his style. So Carberry can bring a bit more threat as an individual runner in attack in terms of line breaks, and that can be a big positive at 10 in the modern game. So yeah, I think he would have put a little bit of pressure on Johnny, but not a huge amount. I still think it was a very clear 1 and 2 had Carberry been fit.
Okay, so let's get to the Byrne brothers. You've got Harry Byrne ahead of Ross Byrne, and Jack Carley does not appear on this depth chart at the moment, so it's safe to assume he's 5th choice. Why is Harry ahead of Ross for you, and do you think Harry is ahead of Ross at this stage for the Ireland selectors too?
I think he is, yeah. I think Harry would be included. He came on in the autumn internationals and I did something that is, I suppose, possibly threatened his involvement in that I think he tried too much. He tried too many complicated things, too many difficult things. And that is the risk when you're a young out half, is you want to show everyone you can pull a rabbit out of a hat and you're very capable at the highest level. And in reality, the opposite is really what's required. You need to seamlessly come into a pretty dynamic environment, and you almost need to underplay your hand. And I think Harry was guilty of overplaying his hand and making mistakes in the autumn internationals when he got an opportunity. I don't think that is a death knell for any out half. I think the players around him, the senior players, the management, like Mike Catt, could very, very easily sit down and with the likes of Harry Byrne and suggest he reels it in a bit. And I think it's an easier thing to do than try and ask a mundane or average player to become exceptional. You can certainly try and put the shackles around a young, ambitious out half with a view to allowing him bed into the environment, underplay his hand for a while, and then he still has the bit of magic in his toolbox. But for that reason, I think, yeah, he's ahead of Ross Byrne. He's probably ahead of Ross Byrne in the Irish selectors' minds for the Six Nations. I think given that Carberry's injured, Sexton is a clear starter. The reason I went for Carty is that's were Sexton to get injured early, a game manager with experience like Jack Carty would be probably the best replacement for now, with Harry Byrne still as a cover. I'm not sure if Sexton got an injury, would you throw Harry Byrne in to start Six Nations games just yet? And that's based on his overall performances in terms of game management.
So how do you see the Irish management edging Harry Byrne towards the starting team? Are they targeting Italy, I wonder, during this campaign?
Yeah, for example, I would totally agree. I think I would start him against Italy. I would start Harry Byrne, even though we know what Carty can do. What I would do is start Sexton, bench Carty, and then in the Italian game, for example, I would leapfrog everyone with Harry Byrne, because we need to see what he's capable of. And in an environment like that, he'd be well suited to coming in. He's very capable, and there's slightly less risk involved in that game. And I think there's not much time left for experimentation, but I do think they should give it a try in maybe one of the games where they know they're going to win well. So I would give him a run against Italy for sure. Owen, yeah.
At that point you make, and I heard you make it with Joe before Christmas as well. I think your analogy was that Harry Byrne can hop up to fifth gear from third gear quite a bit, whereas Ross Byrne is more in third gear a bit more often. Like, is that easier to do if you've just got better players around you? And by extension, then, if Italy is a weakened 15 overall, is that just a harder thing for Harry Byrne to do? Whereas if he's playing with the experienced, seasoned veterans, as it were, that actually just staying in third gear and trying to bring himself off, trying to do the exciting thing, is maybe that's just an easier thing to achieve in those circumstances?
Yeah, I can understand where you're coming from, in the sense, if you're put into a full strength side that's motoring and is well oiled as a machine, it's easier to fit into that environment than when you come in as a starting 10 and you're also accompanied with 7 other changes. So the combinations are not as familiar. But I don't think that excuses overcomplication. I think, in fact, the opposite you could argue. If you're coming into a relatively new team with new combinations, it's really important that you don't overcomplicate and try too many things. In fact, it's probably more relevant to do the mundane things really well when you've not got familiar combinations. So I don't think that gets him off the hook in terms of what he's done. Now, we spoke a few weeks back, and obviously Leinster hadn't played, but in recent weeks, but 1 or 2 of the URC games where he came on after the autumn internationals, he did exactly what I would hope for in a young out half. Is he didn't particularly shine and sparkle, but he started to use people around him in a better way. And I don't think it's anything that is out of his grasp. I just think it's a habitual thing, and it's an age and maturity thing. And his role really is to bring everyone else into the game and make them look good. That's his primary role. It's like saying it's a scrum half who can't pass. An out half who doesn't make the rest of his team look good is not doing his primary job. You're there to be a midfield facilitator. So I think he has that in the locker. It's just an age, maturity and exposure thing. I think coming into an Italian game, regardless of whether he comes into the first choice 15 or he comes in with a number of changes, it's probably the most important role for him is to manage everyone else without kind of overcomplicating the game.
Why do Leinster keep picking Ross ahead of him?
I think for the same reasons. I think Ross fits exactly what Leinster are trying to do in terms of usage of every player around the field. He enhances the strengths of everyone else in a very effortless way because it's his natural game. Whereas Harry is more of the fulcrum of the game revolves around Harry when he's on the field, and it slightly dilutes some of the strengths and powers of the team out wider, or perhaps the execution of team plays or phase plays or patterns where Harry may go off script because he's an intuitive and instinctive player. Sometimes that is counterproductive to running a well-oiled machine. So even though I would speculate that the Leinster management are very aware that Harry is more innately talented than Ross, but for now they're comfortable just picking Ross.
It's a really interesting dynamic, isn't it? Like, it's a very weird situation where two brothers are so different in terms of their skill sets. Like, it's just a strange, it's very strange situation that we have where they're also on the same team and they're also vying for Ireland selection, and yet Leinster have decided that what they need most is consistency in that position, and they know exactly what they're going to get every single time they get it, because that frees whoever plays in their back three and that plays their midfield as well. And it feels like that's what Ireland need, but yet we're all crying out for Harry Byrne to get in the team because we want that X factor and off the cuff stuff. And I don't know what in the long run is actually better for both teams.
Yeah, it's almost a nature versus nurture question. I think Harry by nature has always been that expressive talent, and Ross is always by nature been very different and has kind of turned away from the limelight in his play, and has been very inclusive of everyone around him. And it's just something that is a stylistic thing, very hard to change. The only thing I can relate is my own experience as a young 10. I was very much in the Harry mould, and at the time I would have been third choice behind Raj and Humphreys, but there was never any question of me being involved in the Irish team. I think not based on maybe one-off individual moments. I could produce those, but I was never figuring in the conversation because I was nowhere close to the level of control and game management and reassurance that the likes of Raj and Humps gave, and also their prowess, place kicking, and their successful percentages. I think it's easy to wish for a bit of rock and roll and to see. I mean, we look at Marcus Smith and we look at some of the trends that we're seeing in selection at 10 or across Europe. You're seeing Jalabert and Intimac in France. They're all very exciting. They've all got a bit of X factor in terms of their play. So it's easy to yearn for that. But you've got to trade off with how well the team function with the likes of Sexton or a fit Carberry or potentially a mature kind of game manager like Carty. In Leinster, you've got the exact same with Ross Byrne. But I can understand for sure a kind of a desire in the public to see just someone like Harry Byrne unleashed, allow him make a few mistakes and see how he gets on. And if he was allowed to go out and make a few mistakes and perhaps was given 2 or 3 games in a row, we could see a real diamond. But it's getting close to a World Cup, and it's a Six Nations. It's not usually used for experimentational purposes, so I don't know if he's going to get significant game time.
You've got 2 of Ireland's protagonists from the 2020 Six Nations outside the top 3 there. Is there a chance that we see a lot more Ross Byrne and potentially even Billy Byrne's the Six Nations than people might think?
Yeah, well, I get a sense just from Farrell's history with Billy Burns that he may be involved. He's not someone I particularly would include. I just don't think he's been consistent enough. I think he's very much falling between stools in terms of he's not an outstanding game manager and he's not an outstanding individual talent. And I think if you're going to be picking a 10 for the Six Nations, he's got to be falling into one or the other bracket. He's got to be an outstanding individual talent or prospect or a really top level game manager. And I think you've got that in Carty. You can hear, certainly can understand where O'Driscoll is coming from in terms of some of his misgivings with Carty, maybe turning his shoulders and running sideways. But there's a lot of 10s do that in the modern game. But Billy Burns certainly does it. Billy Burns doesn't kick, plays kick at international level. His kicking out of hand has got a lot of variation and threat to it. And he's a little bit of a running threat, but I don't think he's in any way head and shoulders above the likes of Harry Byrne, Ross Byrne or Jack Carty.
It's not going to be a conversation for this year's Six Nations, but the young Munster duo, obviously, of Ben Healy and Jack Crowley have been spoken about in glowing terms at various points. Jack Crowley is the flavour of the month at the moment. Have you put any thought into what their trajectory is in the next 2 or 3 years, this side of the World Cup, say?
Yeah, well, I think Jack Crowley is a really special talent. I think I heard Raj speaking about him, and probably the highest praise for a Munster out half is getting that level of credibility from Raj. And he spoke about Jack Crowley's unflappable type of approach. He seems to the manner born in the role. He doesn't seem overwhelmed by the communication required on the field, the decision making, and his time on the ball. And he's I think he's a real potential star of the future. I think he may get a run, more runs for Munster in clutch games, but I don't think he's going to get a run in with the Irish squad. Maybe too early in the lead up to the World Cup, maybe in the next World Cup cycle. But he seems to have all the attributes that are required for a top level 10. Quite physical, excellent kicking game, good distributor, threatening runner, and a lot of composure. So for me, I think if you're looking at a shootout between Ben Healy and Jack Crowley, I would go for Jack Crowley, even though Ben Healy's shown a lot of mental strength and concentration skills and very, very good kicking execution. I don't think his all-round game is up there with Jack Crowley.
So Munster obviously very well set with those two for the future, assuming that they can keep them both for the long term, because we know short-term contracts seem to be the order of the day at the moment. Is there a pathway for significant game time for Harry Byrne between now and the Rugby World Cup, either for club or country?
No, I don't think there is. I think he's going to have to live off scraps, and he's going to have to show what he can do when he gets those small opportunities. And very often in professional sport, when somebody comes in and takes a small opportunity by executing in a very simple and non-complicated way, they gain the trust of their coaching team. So I think he's going to have, it's a very, very, very difficult thing to do, is to get sitting on a bench 60, 70 minutes week in, week out, and then come on and arrive at the pitch and tempo of the match, make the right calls, underplay your hand, make sure the team keeps performing, and gain the trust of your coaching team when you're not getting adequate exposure. But I think that's his lot for now. I don't see him getting an extended run in a starting role either for Leinster or Ireland. However, if he can somehow nail the 10-15 minute chances he gets, or if, for example, he gets thrown in the deep end against Italy as a starter, he's got a real opportunity there.
Do we underrate Ross Byrne then, by that token, where the whole country seems to be calling for Harry to leapfrog him, and he's managing to hold him off while at the same time playing, anytime Sexton goes down, they look straight to him, he steps in. A beat isn't missed from a Leinster perspective when Sexton's not there. Do we as a rugby culture underrate what Ross Byrne has done?
I think we underrate what he does with Leinster. I think he's an ideal squad member for Leinster in that previously the way Ireland played when Sexton was the kind of commander-in-chief under Schmidt, there was a hierarchy of how the team was controlled, and it was very much run through Joe Schmidt and Sexton. And when Sexton left that role, it was very hard for anyone to come into the Irish role and, I suppose, replicate what Johnny was doing, and that included Ross Byrne. But Leinster have had a much more, they spread out the responsibility and the decision-making through the team, and it was less of a hierarchy. And when Sexton wasn't involved with Leinster, Ross Byrne came into the team. It was a more seamless transition into that team, and I think he gained a lot of confidence and a lot of belief from his teammates and from his coaching team in those years. And I think he's very much the ideal backup for Sexton in Leinster, and he often plays a lot more rugby than Sexton in the URC as well. But I'm not sure, to answer the question, Ger, like, he is underrated in terms of what he's done overall. I still don't think he is, talent-wise, I don't think he can do what Harry can do. And I think Harry leapfrogging him coming into an international setup, surrounded by a team that's purring and doing well, Harry can add a little bit of X factor in terms of game-breaking ability. And I think that's what sets him apart. That's why people want to see him get a role or a run in the Irish team ahead of Ross. We know what Ross can do, which is, I suppose, the simple things done well on a repeated basis. But at international level, you need a little bit more. And I think Harry has the ability to crack open a defence in a different way.